Good afternoon. Today I am joined by Knox Msebenzi, who is the Managing Director of the Nuclear Industry Association of South Africa. He is here to help us understand about nuclear technology and as the solution to the energy needs of Africa. He joins us today from Johannesburg. Welcome, Knox.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Lovely to have you here. In a recent presentation that you gave, you came up with some very startling statistics on Africa's energy deficit. So I'll just relay them here. There are 600 million people in sub-Saharan Africa who have no access to electricity. 48 countries in sub-Saharan Africa have roughly the same installed capacity of electricity as Spain, but have 18 times the population size. Over 50% of this capacity is in South Africa. So those statistics should give people an idea of how dire the situation is. Africa, sub-Saharan Africa in particular, needs incredible amounts of energy. And as we know, energy is the power to develop, to industrialize. So Africa needs energy and more energy. What would you say, Knox? How critical is that? I mean, those statistics are pretty dire.
It is absolutely critical. All we need to do is to look at the developed countries and see the role of coal, for instance, in the development when economies moved from firewood, as it were, to coal as a concentrated form of power or energy, if I may put it like that.
Yeah.
And then that is how all these countries industrialized. And then, of course, the oil that came about is another form of fossil fuel. Unfortunately, with Africa, the colonial approach was to extract the resources and take them to Europe and America, to the north, to the global north, basically, and not so much erect infrastructure for developing power generation. With the exception of South Africa, of course, we had a sort of a local colonial power in the form of the apartheid government that actually thought about installing capacity. This is why we ended up with so much electrical power in South Africa compared to the rest of sub-Saharan Africa. The colonial attitudes of the people that occupied the rest of sub-Saharan Africa was basically to extract resources and ship them over to their countries. So coming back to the issue about the dire need for electricity, yes, there's no other way than to develop. Right now, because of what I alluded to earlier in terms of extraction, so what we have in Africa is primary industry, that is the extractive industry. Right. And the infrastructure that we have is basically to collect the resources and ship them to the developed north. What we need is to then focus on Africa and build as much infrastructure as possible. The statistics that I've quoted of the sub-Saharan Africa having roughly the same installed capacity as Spain, one can argue quite accurately that it's somewhat outdated because of the installed capacity that is subsequently been put in place with wind and solar. We say that's well done, but unfortunately wind and solar cannot be the basis. So far, they have not been the basis for industrialization. So Africa has not yet seen the benefits of industrialization. And in any event, the capacity of these forms of energy, because of the low energy density, it's very difficult for these sources of energy to bridge the gap in terms of electrifying 500 million people. And in the same statistics, even those that are electrified, we find that 900 million people do still use the dirty forms of energy for cooking. You might find a house in Soweto which has got electricity. That electricity is used for the fridge and for television and for lighting. When they want to prepare a meal, they go outside and light a paraffin or a wood stove or what have you. So that statistic is startling, because we will find that although people have got electricity, I was at a conference one time in Malawi, Blantyre, where they were saying, yes, we do have a lot of people in the cities are connected to the grid, but they actually every evening or every morning and afternoon and evening, when they prepare meals, they go outside and light up a fire in the cities. Mm-hmm. So we have got a problem in terms of the amount of energy that we will need. We are not different from people of the North. We will need each person to have a certain access to number of kilowatt hours on a daily basis. Mm. So that is the situation that we're in. So our argument is always been, Africa cannot afford the luxury of being nitpicky and saying we only want this type of energy source. It is important, of course, to note that Africa should not make the same mistakes that were made in the developed countries in terms of polluting the environment. So we can continue to use our resources, our God-given resources, be it oil or be it coal, but in a responsible manner. Mm. But there is where nuclear comes in as handy, because it satisfies the requirements for clean, sustainable energy source. So it really ought to play a very important part. And also, given the amount of the energy gap that we have, the energy poverty that Africa has, we can never have too much of that power coming out of our nuclear power generation. So it is very, very important that Africa develops that. And one of the problems that we have as a continent is, because of colonial legacy, we have a disintegrated, or we don't have a coherent approach to energy. If we work together as African countries and cooperate, we might find that a small country has got a low infrastructure for electricity and they've got a very low electricity demand. But if these countries club together and approach power generation in a regional projects, it would help. Can you imagine the west coast of Africa that has got Accra, Lagos, Abidjan, you name it, all those cities are along along West Africa. If they could be a master plan that really puts opportunities in terms of massive power generation and massive supply of power distributed to all the cities 24/7, 365 days a year, we would make the African continent a much better place. The same applies to places like Kinshasa in DRC. Of course, this is what has been happening to Cape Town and Johannesburg because of the leakers of coal, but we need to go beyond that, as we in South Africa have decided to decommission in the next 30 years our coal plants. We need to substitute them with predominantly nuclear and some renewable energy sources. Mm. So I guess that is really basically the approach that many other African countries need to adopt, in my view.
But it's the perfect time, because we've got the railway, the African Integrated High-Speed Railway Network, with the Continental Railway Network, which is supposed to be taking place. And it's kind of growing in various areas. And it's all about connecting African countries, connecting with each other. So the high-speed railway network comes in beautifully with your whole idea of sharing the energy and creating energy pools, so that you have your energy pools, as you were saying, along the coast of West Africa, East Africa, energy pools, Southern Africa, the SADC region. So the time is now. The time is right now, isn't it?
Yeah, the energy pools, the power pools already exist. I think what is short in the power pools is the capacity for generation, and people have been grappling. It becomes a little bit of a challenge to imagine that the solar and wind, and perhaps to some extent geothermal, but geothermal it's a different kettle of fish in East Africa, Kenya predominantly, right, because geothermal can be regarded as a dispatchable power source, because it does not depend on the weather. It's not intermittent. It is there. If you exploit it, you can actually go for it. So other forms of renewable energy like biothermal is probably out because of the need for biodiversity and the need to not.
What is biothermal, Knox?
Geothermal, I mean geothermal.
Oh, just geothermal. Yeah.
Geothermal, sorry. Yeah. I was talking about biothermal, you burn.
Burning like sugarcane or.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, biothermal, yes. That's quite right. So that sometimes people want to talk about you grow grain, and some of that grain, when you harvest, you use it as grain, but I think the stock that comes out of that, you use it for power generation. Yes, I think biothermal is a byproduct of a certain process. If you've got a sugarcane factory where you are basically, the main aim is to produce your sugarcane, but then you've got this byproduct, then you can use it. But to have dedicated farms or to harvest trees and vegetation for purposes of generation of power is probably not such a good idea when you have such resources as nuclear. You spoke about the railway network, and I also alluded to the fact that there are power grids. They obviously, in order to make the railway network viable, the source of power has to be electrical. These high-speed trains have got to be powered by electrical power. Yeah. So it means the power grids have got to be talking to each other. A train should be able to leave Cape Town and dock in Lusaka and have no interruption of power supply along the way. That means basically the various grids would have to, or the national grids will have to take over in their spaces. So that's very important. The infrastructure for the railway as well as the infrastructure for power, that's where they go hand in hand, and also the infrastructure for roads.
Yeah, and of course, with the whole AFTA, the Continental Free Trade Area, yes, you know, this is all bringing countries together. Knox, your screen has gone very dark. Is there anything you can do?
Oh, sorry, let me put on the power.
Yeah.
Lights.
Put on the electric.
Yeah. Is it better?
Yeah, that's great.
I completely forgot about. I got carried away with talking, and I've completely forgot about that. I started off when the sun was still.
Yeah, and the sun went down.
Yeah, that's right. It's now actually just set. Yeah.
The solar panel didn't work anymore.
Yeah, they're completely off now. And it's very still. It's still there's no wind blowing at all.
Yeah, your lights will go out in a minute if it weren't for Coburg and coal. Yeah. Okay, so if we just talk about, so many people know nothing at all about nuclear. If they know anything, they think it's a dangerous technology, very harmful, bad for the environment, bad for health. And they hear very little positive stuff. I recently learned from you that South Africa was a world leader in nuclear technology. And actually, South Africa was a world leader in the time of Thabo Mbeki for the pebble bed reactors. How come such amazing stuff that South Africans have to be proud of is not being shared by the media? It's not a well-known thing. What achievements South Africa have made, because to be a world leader in nuclear technology is an amazing thing.
The thing is, if you start a race, a 100-meter race, and you are ahead of everybody, but you drop out of the race, nobody thinks about you anymore. Right. They will only think about the person who ultimately got the medal.
Yeah.
We were at one stage ahead of everybody in the world by our development of the pebble bed modular reactor. And everybody was looking up to us. But we made political decisions to exit that technology. And other people saw potential for it and took that technology or copied or emulated that technology. And in some instances, they just developed from scratch and started developing small modular reactors. The history of small modular reactors, it goes quite a long way. While South Africa was developing the pebble bed modular reactor from primarily a safety point of view as a civil project, small reactors have been used for a very long time, since the Second World War, basically.
Really?
Since the advent of nuclear power, but have been used in Navy ships. Most, if not all, nuclear countries have got nuclear submarines that are running on small nuclear generators that power these submarines. Right. But these are not for civil application, these are military, so it's somewhat of a no-go area. Plus, when it comes to military, economics is not top on the agenda, it's more about strategic capability. Right. So the development of civil nuclear, such that it makes economic sense, it is safe for public and blah, blah, that's the new development that is taking place, but it's on the basis of what already has been happening. So humankind have got a tendency to build on past building blocks, and we go forward from that. Yeah. So this is not something new. So what going back to the situation with South Africa and the pebble bed, political decisions were taken to exit that, and therefore we can no longer claim to be ahead of the pack. But fortunately, as we are pursuing our nuclear, the government of South Africa has emphasized the fact that when they did a request for information, they actually said we would actually welcome proposals that would take advantage of some of the work that we have already done on the pebble bed modular reactor to build on it, so that we can get advantages of that intellectual property or whatever the case may be. So we have not completely thrown it out. We're still looking at possibly building upon it. But my personal view is that other people have run with the with the baton, and for us to catch up and stand a chance of being ahead of the pack is next to nothing. I think the best we can do at this point is to combine our experience with whatever has been developed elsewhere, and then see how we can localize the technology. Because the crux of the matter is not just buying a capability, but actually being able to manufacture and sustain the technology. And more importantly, to be able to roll it out throughout the African continent. And why not? We have the technological advantage, if you like, because of our infrastructure. And we are well located in terms of rolling out that technology to the rest of the continent.
Mm. Yeah. It would be a beautiful thing for, if many African countries were to adopt the pebble bed. A pebble bed reactor is a small modular reactor, yeah?
Yes, it is.
Same thing.
Yes.
Same thing. So, because if African countries adopted that as a means of energy generation, it's kind of beautiful in a way that initially it was a South African technology developed by South Africa, even though, as you say, it has now been adopted and South Africa is not in the front of it all. But there's something still great that technology was developed by South Africans.
Let me just clarify that it's not all that the small modular reactors that are based on the same technology. It's a bit like saying the Americans developed the automobile.
Yeah.
But in their case, they managed to develop it and actually put it on the market. But the Japanese also developed automobiles. The British also developed automobiles. The Germans also developed automobiles.
Mm.
While the general technology is the same, but there are differences in approach. So each one has got its own intellectual property, has got its own pros and cons. Sorry, its own pros and cons, if you like. So we cannot say every small modular reactor out there is based on the South African technology. The technology was that of pebble bed modular reactor. There are other forms of small modular reactors that are not based on the pebble bed. So it's very important to make that distinction. So from an economic point of view, we may find ourselves perhaps adopting something that has been developed elsewhere, so that it becomes is cheaper and more economical to roll out on the African continent.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You gave me a fantastic vision. It was in an interview you did a few months ago with somebody else, and you were talking about West Africa. So all the cities along the West African coast, around the Gulf of Guinea and round a bit there, Lagos, Abidjan, Dakar, all those cities joining up with these small modular reactors, and those reactors supplying the energy needs to that whole coastline. It's just such a beautiful vision of power generation, but there's a kind of a beauty in the fact that this solution to energy needs would in fact unite and unify whole regions.
Absolutely, it's the way to go. In fact, one can only surmise that the only opposition to such developments would be perhaps people that have got people or entities that have got vested interests, because that's likely to kill home power generation. That is likely to kill consumption in oil. We are often told that Africa cannot afford nuclear because nuclear is expensive, blah, 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 and the figures are quoted and everything. But when you look closely at how much Africa spends on fossil fuels, on oil.
Yeah.
And if you were to divert that money to investment in nuclear, you find that it is not all that expensive after all. And the expensive aspect of it is really basically because of the interest rates that we have to pay as the continent in general. There's a well-known economist who wrote a paper from University of Cape Town. In that paper, he said, it is not that Africa is borrowing too much. The problem with Africa is that it's paying too much in interest rate. The countries that do not need the money pay next to nothing interest rate. The countries that need the money to develop infrastructure pay exorbitant amounts for the same money. So we've got those problems of equity throughout the world. So coming back to the issue about developing nuclear, if we had leadership that had a vision towards an integrated approach to exploiting energy resources, I think we will find that West Africa, East Africa, Southern Africa could put our heads together and focus on projects that will facilitate or empower these sub-regions to have adequate power. We were talking the other day and saying, can you imagine what it would look like if in the cities of Lagos, Accra, Abidjan, there was electricity available 24/7, available even for erection of factories, for manufacturing goods, for processing, agro-processing and everything. So power is not a problem. When somebody wants to erect some industry in West Africa, they don't have to worry about where shall we get the power. The power is a given. If we could get to that stage where there is sufficient power in the country 24/7, then we will have solved the economic problems of Africa as a continent. And by that, we are not being exclusive to saying the only form is nuclear. It could be a combination of nuclear, renewable, and clean coal. So this is what this is really our position, to say, let us not have a dogmatic approach to saying only one form of energy is the right one. Let us explore all of them. Let the economics sort out which one is the best way. Let it not be a case of lobbyists panting for a particular form of energy. We, as the people who are pro-nuclear, should not mislead everybody on the continent and say, stop doing your solar, stop doing your wind. If it is appropriate, by all means do it. But let us have an open mind and introduce what makes sense economically. And remember, also as a continent, we are very big. Sometimes centralized power generation might not be the answer. This is why big nuclear power plants perhaps could not solve the problems of the African continent. But with the small modular reactors, which could be sized anything, sometimes even as low as 10 megawatts, 50 megawatts, 100 megawatts. So even cities, municipalities can actually go for their own power generation in nuclear and supply their residents. That's where we are going as the world.
Very fair of you to say that. Unbelievably fair of you to say that people who are pro-nuclear mustn't be dogmatic about it, and that it can all be a mix. I mean, yes. African solutions to African challenges. Not every country in Africa can have hydropower, because there isn't enough water. There are not enough rivers in some countries. Some countries, you know, maybe nuclear is not the answer right now because of instability. So there are many things, aren't there? There are many issues to bring in. The natural gas in Mozambique, there's, you know, that's going to be a huge change there for that whole region once the insurgency problem can be solved. But just one question, you know, there's a lot of hydro happening at the moment, a lot of dams being built to produce hydropower, and something I certainly never fully appreciated was the transmission lines. So you generate power. So just say, for example, whether it's nuclear or hydro or whatever it is, solar farm, wind turbines. So you generate the power at source, and then you have to, like energy logistics, you have to transport it on cables. So can you just explain about transmission lines and like the increase in cost if you have to go, as we know, Africa's vast. Most countries are vast beyond most European and Americans' idea of how big things are. So you have transmission lines having to cover a huge distance. So can you just talk a little bit about that as another issue surrounding energy and energy generation?
I think the issue about transmission lines, in my view, has got to be approached from a point of view of power pools. The idea that you build a huge power supply at Inga Dam, for example, and build a massive transmission line from DRC to Johannesburg or to Dar es Salaam, whatever the case may be, it might not be the ideal. What I see personally as the way forward is infrastructure within the DRC in terms of transmission within the DRC to Kinshasa, to Lubumbashi, or whatever, and then across the border to Zambia. Then from Zambia across the border to Botswana, to Zimbabwe, and then from Zimbabwe across the border to South Africa. So you basically are using good neighborliness in terms of exchanging power, because power can be made to flow in whatever direction that you want. So I can see a situation, for example, where the Great Inga would supply the entire Zambia with power, and the entire Malawi with power. But Zambia is generating its own power. It can then supply perhaps the entire Zimbabwe with power, because Zimbabwe and Zambia are interconnected.
Right.
And then Zimbabwe supplies to South Africa. We have solved the problem of transmission of power by not doing very much, by using the infrastructure that you already have, but making sure that instead of me getting all my power from a long distance away just because it's a national generation station, but I can just cross the border here and get it closer. Right. What I have over there on the Zambezi, I can ship it away to the southern neighbors and so on. So it's to me, that would be the way to approach even in West Africa. There is some infrastructure that is there. Use that infrastructure, expand on that infrastructure as time goes on, as the need arises, and so solve the problem incrementally as the economy grows, as the demand grows. You put in whatever infrastructure is in place. But if you have got a big project that you're looking for example, if you've got the Inga and you are able to supply countries like Chad and whatever, even with water for that matter, then it has to be based on economics. And a lot of places can be fed with, for example, with water, with gravity feed. We have that situation in with water coming from Lesotho, the highlands in Lesotho, that supply Gauteng. It's predominantly gravity fed, because the highlands are very high up, so the water is just high up in the Drakensberg version of Lesotho, the Maluti Mountains.
Mm. Yeah. So it's just basically gravity fed is going downhill.
That's right. So there's no pumps involved. It just flows on its own because it's flowing downhill.
Okay.
It's like an artificial river, except in the case of the water from Lesotho. It actually it flows into a river, and then the river does the rest of the journey to the Val Dam.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Knox, a question on transmission of electricity. So if you have, okay, say Grandenga, so then you're generating the power, you're generating the electricity is then in the transmission line. Does the electricity lose, I don't know the word here now, wattage, or does it lose wattage as it travels great distances? Do you have to keep bumping it up, or like how does it work? I mean, I know that's a stupid question, but maybe other people don't understand that either about electricity.
Okay, when you transmit electricity, there is what is known as technical losses. The transmission lines lose because they get hot. Consider a long transmission line like the element in a kettle.
Right.
The reason why you heat up water is you're passing electricity through a resistor element. That's the element. Yeah. So a long transmission line, you can consider it like that element. So it will generate some heat as electricity passes through it, and those are technical losses. So you can start off with so many megawatts at the sending end. The receiving end would have less megawatts because of the loss along the way.
Because it heats up.
It heats up as it increases, just like the element in a geyser or in a kettle. But it's unintended because the conductors are not perfect conductors. They have some resistance in them. So there is some loss that you see. So it's not so much the boosting, because the voltage can be controlled. But you have to live with the fact that if you have got 10 megawatts at the sending end, depending on how long your transmission line is, you will probably have 8.5 or 9 megawatts at the other end. The other megawatt has been lost along the way.
Yeah.
That's how it works. It's the law of nature, unfortunately.
Yeah. Or maybe one day we'll find a solution to that.
Well, unless you've got superconductors, and they might not be economical. By superconductors, you mean there is absolutely no resistance to the flow. If you understand the physics of how electricity flows through a conductor, the best possible conductor has got some resistance. It might be very low, but it has still got some resistance. So that has not been it's not been an area of major focus. And I think the era we are going to, where we are going to reduce the length of the transmission lines, might not require so much research and development in terms of reducing the resistance. Because you see, on a practical level, an ideal conductor might not have the metallurgical properties and the strength to be able to withstand from one pylon to the other. So you make a compromise on your cable. It cannot be 100% copper. It is copper, but it's got some steel for strength at the center, and so on. So you are bound to lose some power, because when you run electricity through a steel conductor, it's not the best conductor. Copper alone is not that strong. It's ductile and it's not so the construction of a power line has got to have some metallurgical compromises, which it inevitably has to have some losses along the way.
Yeah, I didn't know that one. I thought it was all just copper.
No. Copper doesn't have the certain strengths. So you need to have, you find that in a stranded conductor, strands, the core of the conductor is probably made of steel, but the surrounding strands are copper or silver, or aluminium.
Oh, aluminium. Why aluminium?
In fact, aluminium is a lot better because of its lightweight.
Ah, okay.
Copper is a little bit heavier. Yeah. So it's a bit, copper typically is used in distribution when you don't have long distance transmission lines.
Okay. So that's, thanks for clearing that up. So yeah, it's a very pertinent subject at the moment, isn't it? Africa's energy needs.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's the answer to Africa's development. I think it was the president of the African Development Bank, when he was speaking at the World Economic Forum. He said, he was addressing African leaders. He said, you need to give your people power, otherwise they will get you out of power.
Oh, I like it. That's great.
Yeah, it says you need to give people power, otherwise they will get you out of power.
Kick you out of power. They kick you out of power. Oh, I like it. Yeah. But electricity, it is just the level, the change in the economic level that electricity 24/7, as you were saying, the change that it makes, just a little thing. No, it's not a little thing, but I was watching something on Tanzania and their rural electrification program, and they're doing really well. They've managed to connect a huge area. I mean, Tanzania is a vast country. And they've now managed to connect, I can't remember the percentage, but it's getting to the point where it's really quite high now, to the grid. And they have already noticed that in the rural areas, once people are connected, that the children's school marks, their grades, have gone up. Of course, because they can study at night.
Yes.
Mom or dad can put the light on and they can do their homework, because when the sun goes down in Africa, it's dark,
Yes.
If you don't
and
have
also the other benefits of access to the internet when you've got power and access to all this, it's so many things.
Yeah.
That you can just imagine. Let me just tell you a quick anecdotal story. I was in a very rural part of South Africa one time with a friend of mine. We had gone to visit some relatives of his wife. And we observed quietly. This friend of mine is a professor, is an electrical engineer professor at a university. And so we were observing when we were having our dinner. We could not help in the conversation, but to observe that this meal that we are having, is probably the most expensive meal ever in terms of the inputs. The firewood, the water, the processing of they actually processed a sheep when we were over there. They slaughtered a sheep for us. So we're taking into account all these things, and we said this is the most labor-intensive meal that we've ever had. So the point I'm trying to make is this:
because they had done everything from scratch.
They've done everything.
They killed the sheep. They'd cut down the tree to get the firewood.
Exactly. So if they could flip a switch to boil water to cook a meal, how convenient is that going to be?
You free up the time to be creative.
To do other things, yes.
To
Electricity is such a, I mean, it's a no-brainer that electricity is such an enabler.
Yeah, and exactly, an enabler.
Yeah.
There was, brilliant, there was a guy, he was a sculptor in Nigeria working on bronzes and making these bronzes. And he was just making stuff for the tourist market. And he said he was just making stuff just to survive, just to get by. And he needed electricity to do his work. And he just had a diesel generator to do everything he needed to do. He spent most of what he earned on buying diesel.
You see?
Yeah. And the other thing he said was, people like me, we're just trying to make a living. We're just trying to get food on the table. Imagine what we could do if we were allowed to use our creativity. So if he could earn enough money in one day to buy the family food, imagine the beautiful things that he could make if he had
the rest of the time. Yes.
Yeah. And all
Absolutely.
of it was coming down to the diesel, because he was buying diesel to get the electric from the generator.
This is where, for example, if a community is far removed from the possibility of grid, and it does not make sense to erect even a nuclear small modular reactor, small community of a few people, farming community, by all means, the idea of solar power generation is okay. It's a solution to a given problem. Where I have a problem is when we're talking about running grids with solar and wind, which is intermittent. If I've got a farm and the main requirement from my farm is to pump water from the ground or from the river, it does not matter that it is not available 24 hours a day. When the sun is shining, I will pump the water into a tank.
Yeah.
If at night I have water, I've got water 24/7 because I've got a tank.
But if you had a dairy farm, you need to keep your milk chilled. You need to keep the milk cold 24/7.
That is correct. That is correct. So yes, absolutely. As you increase the economic activity, there are some activities that you need to have 24/7. If you're running a mine and people are going underground 24 hours a day, you can't rely on solar, and there's not enough. The technology for storage in batteries is not advanced enough to be able to do it economically.
Yeah. Well, Knox, I've learned a lot once again. Thank you so much. I don't know if there's anything more you would like to say, or we're coming near to our time.
No, that's fine. That's and I've enjoyed this conversation.
Yeah, there's just so much that we all need to learn, and
that's right.
You know, that people like you can give us the benefit of your knowledge, and just to make this whole idea of electricity, nuclear technology, and as you say, that you give it a very fair argument that as long as we are generating reliable electricity in Africa 24/7 and supplying needs and more than the need, then it doesn't matter what it is, and it makes us good.
The important thing is it's got to be reliable. It must be there at 2 a.m. when I want it.
Yeah.
In a hospital, when I'm running a hospital, when I'm operating a patient, I need that power to be there for my machinery to operate a patient.
Exactly. Yeah, you can't not have. I mean, the benefits of having that are there's just so many things. And you know, like the railway, the Continental Railway, the whole. You said it earlier, and I've got to write it down as a quote. But it changes the economic dynamic. So when you have this amazing railway system that's going to be built, when you have electric available 24/7 to all African countries, not just domestic consumption, but to supply industries, manufacturing, factories, hospitals, healthcare, schools, what have you. It puts the economy on a level which has previously been unknown. It just transcends the economy, but everything comes down to electricity and energy being the power to develop, the power to industrialize.
I have a feeling that some people that might be arguing that Africa should not go the route of building this infrastructure don't have a vision that Africa could be a manufacturing hub of not only things that they need for their own consumption, but also for export. I don't think there is that in those people's vision. If we think that if we have got this idea that one day we will become economically competitive, manufacture certain things on a comparative advantage basis, not necessarily everything, but there are certain things that we will become very good at manufacturing and exporting to the world instead of exporting raw materials. We should be the ones that are exporting solar panels because there is a lot of cobalt that is used. We should be the ones that are exporting electric vehicles because how much percent of cobalt in the world comes from the DRC? Yeah. Why are we exporting the cobalt and not the products that are made out of cobalt? So we should be thinking along those lines. And for us to be able to do that, we need to have the infrastructure to have smelters. We can't have smelters on intermittent power. We need reliable power 24/7 that we can use to convert our ore, iron ore, whatever ore, into the products that are required by the world, not just exporting commodities. We should move away from commodity export into exporting finished goods and products.
Exactly, yeah. And as you say, high-tech stuff.
Absolutely.
Don't just mine the cobalt, make the solar panels.
And for people who argue that there is not enough manpower, human resources in Africa, Africans do not have the right training or the right experienced people. No. What they need to do is to look around the world, the global north, and see how many Africans are contributing in those economies. I think one of the activists was quoted as saying there are more Nigerian doctors in the United States than there are in Nigeria. And that is a startling statistic.
Africa needs that talent back.
Yeah, the talent has got to be, but the infrastructure has got to be there for the talent to come.
The infrastructure and then the salaries.
Exactly.
Yeah. But just a quick story before we finish. You know, going back to 1956, am I right? Yeah, about then. And when Abdel Gamal Nasser of Egypt, he nationalized the Suez Canal. And he did it very, very quickly, almost overnight, because he knew there'd be a furore from Britain. And they all said, oh, well, it's okay to nationalize the Suez Canal, but you haven't got any skilled people to be the tug pilots, because the tugboats take the tankers through the Suez Canal, and the tug pilot's a very skilled job. You have to know a lot of navigation. You have to know how the waters of the canal are. And they all said, well, you know, there's no point in nationalizing it because Egypt hasn't got the skilled manpower to do it. And NASA said, we'll see about that. So he found a tug pilot who had only 2 weeks training, Egyptian, and he had only 2 weeks to learn the job. And so when the British evacuated and the canal was solely Egyptian, this tug pilot did the first mission, he took the first tanker through the canal, and almost the whole population were there on the banks of the canal watching, you know, like holding their breath. And NASA and his wife and all their children were there, and they were all watching this poor guy make this first journey. And he did it, you know, no problem. And it was just a beautiful story of the self-belief, you know, that anyone who thinks, oh, Africans haven't got the skills to do this, there's not enough skill, what's it, you know, hey, people learn fast.
Yeah, when there's a program, I've always argued that when it takes a program for people to learn to do certain things. I've often argued that the reason why there are no competent beer brewers in Saudi Arabia is not because Saudi Arabians are stupid. It's because there is no brewery industry in Saudi Arabia. So once you introduce brewing in Saudi Arabia, guess what? You will find brewers, master brewers. So if you don't have a program, you will not have that skill. There's no need for that skill. So
exactly.
So you introduce the nuclear program in Africa. It goes with the skills development to, you know. So yeah, that's how it happens. I mean, how many people would want to argue that there are no people who, some time ago, there are no people who could fly planes in Africa, but but there are so many pilots now. Skills can be developed just like that.
Of course they can. Of course they can. Yeah. And don't mix the beer and the nuclear.
No, of course not. Yeah, but yeah, the UAE are doing very well with their nuclear, but at the moment they predominantly South African workers in the UAE.
Oh, really?
But they are obviously developing their own people.
Yeah.
But remember, the UAE has got very small population in most of their industries. Right. They rely on foreign expertise anyway, foreign labor.
Foreign labor.
Yeah, because they've got small populations. They are very the guard there. It's very difficult to become a citizen of UAE or Saudi Arabia. You can be
come back to that. So if I just say, well, thank you so much for joining us today, Knox Msebenzi. It's been such a pleasure to talk to you and to learn from you. And I really hope that you will come back soon to talk to us some more and teach us about Africa's energy needs, about nuclear technology, and have another enjoyable conversation. So thank you so much.
The pleasure was mine. Thank you.
Bye-bye.